Hi guys, Robert J. E. Simpson here once again. Thanks for stopping in. It's Mental Health Awareness Week, and this is number 3 of my mentally health themed vlogs. Basically, trying to embrace the week. As I said yesterday, this isn't something we should just be aware of for a week or even a month. It's something that we should be aware of every single day, because many of us at some point will go through some sort of mental health condition, and possibly mental health crisis. Just sort of very wary about the terminology we use, which actually is one of those things, I guess, that one is acutely aware of. I was re-listening last night to the interview I did with Tony Slattery, which is coming up on the Cine Punk podcast soon, possibly this week, and just even kind of talking to him about some of the mental health issues, just being very careful, because the way that we word things has implications, and a lot of the way that mental health is talked about in the media, in public, and casual conversation is not necessarily the best way for it to be spoken about. We use terminology that is loaded, that is coded, and that gives a certain impression of the situation that isn't necessarily true. So, for example, one of the things that perhaps isn't great to talk about is in the sense of mental health being a struggle or a battle, because this suggests something that's confrontational, something that is, I think, by essence negative, and it sounds like one is in opposition to whatever one is dealing with on a constant basis, whereas the reality is, for most of us who have some sort of mental health condition, it's not a battle. It's not necessarily a struggle. It's a case of just living with it, and it's about how we choose to live with it ourselves. Now, this brings me nicely on to my next train of thought, which is about I think I've talked previously about the idea of sort of maybe being ashamed of having a condition, but I think it's also important in that we treat it, and that we talk about it openly. So I did say yesterday that I'd probably talk about talking about this, and that, I think, is for me the big key. So there are many different kinds of treatment that are available out there. The first thing, I guess, is if you are concerned for yourself or for somebody else, talking about it's probably the easiest and best way to go about it. Now, I say easiest, actually it's very difficult sometimes to say to someone, look, I'm having these thoughts, or that I am concerned about myself, or that I'm concerned about you. I can sit there and, you might be my best friend in the world, but to say to you, I'm actually concerned, if it's your spouse, your partner, it can be quite a difficult situation to be in, and to confront someone, especially if that person is not yet at the stage where they're acknowledging the fact that they indeed have some sort of mental health condition. So talking is really important. I think it's a good way of being open. It's a good way of sort of working through stuff, and often I find that when one starts talking about it, that just even the act of verbalizing, particularly if you embrace it, be really honest, be completely on board with it. As you start talking, it will help to formulate links in your own head, and it can be a great way of sort of self-diagnostics, really. Therapy is basically just in its essence, when it works its best, you're talking a lot, and the therapist is sort of sitting there listening, and they'll guide you a little bit. But a lot of the work is done by yourself, and you can do an awful lot of stuff at home by yourself. So talking about it is really important. Talking about my mental health, for me, has kept me sane. It is what keeps me functioning. It is what it stops me being ashamed, because I'm very open about it. But it also allows me to outlet, because I think sometimes we let this stuff pile up and build up, and it's like a pressure cooker, and the pressure's just building and building. And if you're trying to conceal that, if you're trying to hide it all the time, if you're never allowed to give voice to the thoughts that are in your head and the experiences that you're having, it is just going to get to a point where it can't function anymore. And that is usually for me when I have some sort of episode. And I don't even like using the word episode, because I've had people dismiss my experiences as just being little episodes. It's one of those words. It's a euphemism. But when I have, whenever I've had a breakdown, whenever I've had an anxiety attack or panic attack, it is usually because I haven't had an outlet. Sometimes, though, I will also, I mean, those of you who followed me for years now will be aware that occasionally I will tweet about it or I'll blog about something as it's happening, which again for me is a way of keeping a record myself. It's, I guess, as I'm aware now, it's a way of sort of finding an outlet. It's a way of me recording the processes that I've gone through, and it's also helped me spot whenever something is amiss. Sometimes when you start reading back, you can see that there's something been going on in your head and you just haven't picked up on it for a while, and then it suddenly comes to the fore. So, I mean, if you don't want to talk to other people about it, keep a diary, keep little notes, date them. I think sometimes the written word, the spoken word, can be a really great simple tool in terms of trying to navigate and explain this darkened territory. Diagnosis of sort of a mental health condition is really difficult as well. I think many of us want to sort of label the things that we have because it makes it easier in a way to once you've given it a name, you know what it is. It's got, in theory, it's got a clearly defined boundary, and that becomes much easier to process and to deal with. And for a long time, I I didn't have labels for whatever was going on inside my head. I remember going to the doctor as a teenager with sort of depression, and my doctor not being particularly particularly open to the idea that I was depressed. Instead, he sort of put it down to teenage hormones and growing pains and adolescence and all the usual stuff that goes on through our heads. Whereas at the time, I was very aware that there was something else there. Later on, whenever I first went for medication, when I got given anti-depressants, when I spoke to the doctor actually didn't want to put it down on my record that I was on antidepressants for depression because he was concerned about the stigma that might be associated with it. Instead, they went down as being for back relief, pain relief, I think it was at the time, because I had some sort of ongoing back concerns as well. But I think that sort of denied me ownership of whatever was going on in my head because you were sort of saying that whatever was what I was experiencing wasn't actually what I was experiencing. It was something else, and that's not helpful. Getting diagnosis is really difficult. I've already mentioned Tony Slattery this week. There's a new documentary coming out on BBC. It's coming out on the 21st of May, which is tomorrow as I record this. And then if you're watching this after this, it'll be on iPlayer for a while. What's the matter, Tony Slattery? But one of the things that Tony is seeking to do in that documentary is to get a diagnosis for his own mental health conditions. And that's really important and also really difficult because it can help us to get to the essence of what's going on. Now, once you've got something, actually being able to treat it is again a process. So for me, talking therapy I find is the thing that works best. I've spent a lot of time with counsellors on related issues, which have also helped me to sort of work through all this stuff. I also just talk to people now. I talk to people. I do this. I talk to you guys on the internet now through my blog, through these vlogs. I've turned it into part of what I do with my own other work. I'm now able to channel some of it into whenever I do talks, whenever I do lectures, whenever I do our podcast recordings for Cinepunked. I mean, those things also have allowed me to tap into some of what is going on. So for me, it's been a way of channeling it into a more verbal way because this helps me process. And also, I'm very aware that when I talk about this, from the feedback I've had from others, this actually seems to help other people as well. So that's important. But medication is also something that we shouldn't be afraid of. There's no shame in needing medication in order to keep ourselves on an even keel. I remember, again, my doctor talking to me in euphemistic terms when I got given antidepressants about Mother's Little Helper, the Rolling Stones song. I vividly recall this. Basically, it's a song about mums in the 60s being on antidepressants to sort of perk them up and lift them up and take them down and just sort of mood stabilizers. But it was all done in a very euphemistic way. But medication really helps. I have so many friends who have spoken wonders for medication. It's kept them sane. It keeps them on a level keel. And if you can get a doctor that's willing to listen, a good doctor will help you and they'll put you on the right medication. And there are various types out there to try. Now, my own experiences of medication is again, regulars will know, haven't been so good. For me, didn't work with whatever my brain chemistry is. It had very, very serious negative side effects, which is why I then transferred over to talking therapies. Talking for me was the big outlet, and that is most of the time actually has put things right. But there are times whenever one may need to medicate, and there is no shame in it. There are herbal remedies out there as well, which are can help. It's all about just getting oneself into that right frame of mind. But don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. There's nothing wrong with having to speak to a doctor and say, like, I need this stuff. And I would encourage you to do so. And if you're concerned for a friend or a partner or whatever else, you should be able to have those conversations as well. It's not it's not a panacea. It's not a cure all. But it is something that is out there, and it's very, very useful. And again, this is something that we need to do. Is just in order to treat it. Sometimes it's a bit of talking therapy. Sometimes it's a bit of medication. Sometimes it's about other things, about changing your environment, the people you're with, etc., etc. I talked about some of this in the last couple. I'm probably going to come back to this over the rest of the week as well. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on that for today. Big pusher for talking, and also less of a pusher for medication, but it is there. I guess if I lived in California, I might be more tempted to medicate with herbal remedies. Although again, there are risks with those as well because they can induce power. And if I was a user of cannabis, which is legal in certain states and in certain countries, it may be that it introduces paranoia for some people. So it's like, in whatever way you process this, whatever way you deal with it, whatever steps that you take, it's just to monitor yourself as well. And I think that's really, really important. Tracking your ups and downs, working out what it is that sets you off, and also working out if particular form of treatment actually works for you, because not all treatments work for everybody, and not all treatments work for everybody in quite the same way. Bit of a mini lecture today. Hope that's okay for you. So look, folks, you'll find me as per usual on all sorts of social media. I'm Robert J. E. Simpson, on Twitter as Avalard, Avalard. You'll find me on Wednesday nights, live streaming from 10 p.m. UK time on my Facebook channel. I might actually try Twitch and stuff as well. Now I've got some new tech. Who knows? Try and make it more accessible whenever I do. You can chat to me at any point. And look, if you're struggling and you find that there isn't someone who's willing to listen, reach out. There are lots and lots of bodies out there who are there to help you. There are lots of forums online where you can get help. And if worst comes to worst, I don't know if worst comes to worst, but you can always reach out. And people like me, I mean, I can't help everybody by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm always happy to listen, and I'll always try and point people in the right direction, because whatever I can do for somebody else, somebody at one point has done stuff for me, so it's sort of like a repayment. But yeah, look, if you find any of this stuff useful, pop me a comment, pop me a line, share it with other people as well, and subscribe to the YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. Like the Facebook page if you're on my Facebook, and if you're on Twitter, follow me, stuff like that. Okay, until tomorrow and some more mental healthy thoughts. Take care of yourselves, relax, enjoy your day, and if things are not so easy today, that's okay. Just remember that as well. It's okay to not be okay. Sounds like a cliche these days, but it is important to remember this, because sometimes that guilt that we feel, the pressure that we put ourselves under, puts us into a worse place. But maybe that's a conversation for later in the week. All right, take care.